Never in my wildest dreams did I think we'd be making a video about this, because when it comes to CJMF-FM FM 93 radio in Quebec City, we had ourselves a hit from earlier this afternoon that had some really strange information in it. Now, I'll leave a link in the description to the audio where they talk about this. It's from Jerome Landry and Jonathan Trudeau. The title of this audio is this: Martin St. Louis was reportedly seen arm-in-arm with Trevor Zegras. This was published by Martin Busuttil, and if you scroll down in this article, I say article because yes, there's the audio hit included, but there also is some text. Listen to Jerome Landry reveal a story regarding the Montreal Canadiens head coach Martin St. Louis and highly coveted Ducks forward Trevor Zegras. He says that St. Louis was seen Monday in a New York gym where many NHL players train. His attention was obviously focused to one player in particular. My source tells me that the guy he spoke to the most at that gym was Trevor Zegras, and there, they saw each other at the gym. They chatted, and then they left together. I don't know if they went to eat, but Martin St. Louis and Trevor Zegras left the gym together, arm in arm, chummy. Look, maybe that doesn't mean anything either. And of course, what am I doing? Making a full-length YouTube video about some story a guy shared on the radio? But let's assume this is 100% true. We can actually, let's talk about why this may or may not be true. Because I get it, anecdotal evidence in sports talk radio, he said, she said, telephone game. It might not always be the most reliable source of information. But if you wanted to say that Martin St. Louis was in New York, working out at a gym that a lot of NHL players frequently go to, that wouldn't be the most crazy idea in the world. Martin St. Louis is like an honorary American at this point. The guy was in Tampa for so long. He was in the NCAA. He also played for the New York Rangers, so of course he's got knowledge of what that area brings. And we recognize that there are a lot of NHL players that will spend time in New York to do certain events, and there are always these hot spots that you'll see NHL players at. Hotspots exist everywhere throughout the North Americas, to be honest, but realistically in New York there are a few of them. And so for Martin St. Louis and Trevor Zegras to apparently be spotted at the same gym together, okay, that's not the craziest thing in the world considering that Zegras is from Bedford, New York, so he's just back home training. Right? He's not from Anaheim, and as great as it is to spend your summers in Anaheim, the guy spends the entire year there, so going over to New York, heading back home, seeing the folks, that's probably good, right? There are a lot of NHL players from New York, so if this gym is a hotspot that we see players go to a lot, then okay. It's not a surprise that some players will overlap when they're there, right? But to hear that St. Louis and Trevor Zegras both spent some time together and they left the gym together, the article doesn't really talk about whether or not there were other NHL players aside from St. Louis and Zegras there, so we just got to go off the assumption that these two guys were by themselves and then they saw each other and then they're like, okay, let's work out together and then we'll leave. That seems a lot more like a real-world situation rather than just, oh, there are like 100 NHL players and Martin St. Louis singled out Zegras to hang out with the guy for a day. Like, that's an extreme hypothetical. It's a little excessive. I don't think that was the case here. And then, of course, there's the entire telephone thing, right? Oh, he said, she said, oh, I heard from my friend this, and then it was said on the radio that, and now we're talking about it here on YouTube. It's not the most direct source of information, but if we assume that this is legit, I don't know if it really means anything. It could just very well mean that St. Louis is already familiar with Zegras' game. He coached Cole Caulfield, of course, so he probably knows Caulfield's likes, his interests, his friends, so it wouldn't surprise me if at one point St. Louis was like, hey, tell me about your NTDP teammates. Tell me about Jack Hughes, Boldy, Zegras, Turcotte. Especially during the pregame scouting, right? St. Louis got to know what these players are about. And of course, for Trevor Zegras, he's buddy-buddy with Cole Caulfield still. There's no way Cole hasn't spoken to Z and said, hey, St. Louis is a great coach. He's this, he's that. He tells me how to do things. He changes his handiness in practice to exhibit what I should be doing when I shoot, because we're both small guys. So for Zegras to already probably know that Caulfield and St. Louis have a great relationship, and for St. Louis to know the same thing, it's only natural that these two things would attract, right? It's like magnets. So these two guys working out together and leaving, not really the biggest deal in the world. It does intrigue me, though, more so if this was the first time they've ever met. I don't know if that would be the case, really, because, I mean, hockey's a small world, right? It wouldn't surprise me if they had met some other time in the past, but if this was the first time they met and it was spotted by somebody in public, sent over to the radio in Quebec City, and then they spoke about it on air, that is when things get very intriguing. I'm not saying that there's any sort of, like, collateral damage or collusion going on here. Martin St. Louis is not trying to recruit Zegras to his team. That's not what's happening here. We already saw the ideas that were tossed out there saying that Montreal might not even get Zegras because he's too expensive anyway. They're in the sweepstakes. We had seen the updates that they're talking about it. They reignited those calls, but alongside of other teams like the Ottawa Senators and a few others tossed in there, it does not seem like Montreal is going to be able to get a Zegras trade done just because the price seems to be too high. As much as Zegras is great, it does not seem to me like they'd be willing to trade away a Goulet or a Reinbacher to get that trade done. That is, of course, unless we refer to the conversation we had talked about 2 days ago. What if the Montreal Canadiens end up drafting themselves a defenseman in the 5th overall spot? There are a lot of good ones in this year's crop of guys. Silayev, Levshunov, awesome guys. Silayev's a lot more defensive and he's huge compared to Levshunov, but Levshunov is physical and he can produce points. You've got Zeev Buyem, who is an awesome two-way guy. He's so mobile, can get the puck up ice. Zane Parekh is an offensive dynamo. Lots and lots of good defensemen in this year's draft. And if you draft one of them, all of a sudden it makes maybe somebody like a Caden Goulet's job a little bit more expendable. Maybe it makes David Reinbacher's job a little bit more expendable. Not because these guys are bad, but because if you got too many defensemen, you're not going to be able to use them all. So maybe at that point it's easier to trade for a Trevor Zegras, acquiesce to what it is that the Anaheim Ducks are looking for in some sort of a trade, and maybe get that done for the fans. Who really knows? But of course, for now, though, it just seems like the Canadiens are not going to be touching this. It doesn't really seem like something they would want to do. For now, though, all we can do is look at Trevor Zegras and Martin St. Louis as a buddy-buddy relationship, it seems like, that was spotted out in public and talked about on Quebec City FM radio. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll leave a link in the description to this audio. I mean, it's the two hosts going out there and talking about it for 4 minutes, and of course it's in French. So if you don't understand French, then you probably don't have any reason to listen to it, but hey, I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do. It just was very interesting to hear that St. Louis and Zegras were apparently seen arm in arm together at the gym. So let me know your thoughts if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan. How much does this really impact our conversations? Does this mean anything? In my opinion, it doesn't mean anything, but it also doesn't mean nothing. It's just there. Extra info that we can chew on for a little bit too long because there isn't much info out there. When it comes to Trevor Zegras and the Canadiens and the trade, does not really seem like that's going to be too much of a possibility, but you know, crazier things have happened in the past, right? The Montreal Canadiens are still in it, and Marty St. Louis already got that buddy-buddy thing going on with Z, so we'll take a look as to how the situation unfolds over the next few days. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're an Anaheim Ducks fan, how does it make you feel to hear that Trevor Zegras is spending time with the head coach of one of the teams he is projected to being traded to in Montreal? Does that kind of tickle your spidey sense a little bit? Trevor Zegras is a pretty sociable guy, so I don't think it's all too surprising to hear that if he sees somebody he knows, he'll go out there and talk to him. And Martin St. Louis is a coach, for crying out loud, so he's got to have that social aspect as well. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.